welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of MetriSight, a podcast from Metrigy. I'm Beth Schultz. I'm the Vice President of Research and a Principal Analyst with Metrigy. And with me today is Diane Myers. Diane is our Senior Research Director, and she's responsible for our market forecasting and vendor rankings, which are part of our MetriCast service, which she also oversees. Today, we're going to be walking through our third annual ranking of CCaaS providers. So Diane, get us started by just reminding everybody about the MetriRank process.
Yeah, great. Hi, thanks everyone. So within certain categories, and in this case, we're looking at contact center as a service, right? So the CCaaS market, we do a kind of a deep dive review across a couple of different metrics, right? To look at who are the leading providers and, how are they faring? How are they comparing across different criteria? Those criteria to even be in it, right? We look at market share. And in this case, we look at revenue market share for CCaaS. That is the most kind of fair common denominator in terms of market share that we view in this market. And we look at, the top 20 companies. And then we say, okay, in this case, we looked at top 12 and then did the further ranking from there. So we took the top 12 and looked at it. We looked at their financials. We looked at see how are they growing their market share relative or their market, are they growing faster or slower than their peers? We look at the product mix, right? We look at a huge, long laundry list of features and capabilities. And then we have two different scores that are based on our studies where we're going out and we are interviewing or we're surveying buyers. And if someone says, "Oh, I'm a buyer of," or I use this solution for CCaaS, we ask them across a bunch of different customer sentiment categories, right? We look to see how are they rating their company around AI features and reliability and security and things like that. And then we look at customer business success, which is how are you faring in terms of like CSAT scores, agent turnover. Those are two that we use in this scenario or in this product area. And we look at how they are their rating and how they're doing basically, with the sense that your score using this platform and how does that compare to others. So those are our 6 rating criteria.
Okay, thank you for that overview. Now let's just dive right into it. So give us the rundown. Who are the providers? What are the rankings? And go ahead and give us a highlight of each of them as well.
Yeah, well, let's start with the top 3, right? And number 1 is NICE. And this is the third year we're doing this report. NICE is number 1 for the third year in a row. And then we have Five9 and we have Genesys. But let me circle back and talk a little bit about NICE. NICE is the market share leader. And we do weight some of our categories, and market share being kind of the key metric for leadership, right? And so they get a big boost, right? So they are the market share leader. They have very strong financials, well above average for their financial strength. They have the strongest market momentum. So not only are they the largest company, but they are outpacing the market. They are growing and doing well and gaining share, which is quite a feat when you are a larger company, right? Sometimes you can grow faster and bigger when you're smaller. But NICE really has that momentum behind them. They've got all the product marketing pieces. So top scores for momentum, top scores for product mix, top scores for market share, and they don't have the top score for customer sentiment or business success, but they're still above average in those categories. So that's nice. Five9 and Genesys. Five9, they have been the second company for the same thing for third year in a row. They are the third largest market share company in the CCaaS market. They also have well above average financial strength. They're right there with market momentum. They're right on the average, so they're not doing worse or better. They've got really good market momentum. They've got extremely high, strong product mix. They're one of the early companies in this space, so they're just continuing to lead and do well on product mix. They had the second highest customer sentiment possible score, so they did very well with that. And so that's Five9. And I will tell you, Genesys. Gosh, they came in. It was so close. Five9 and Genesys. The difference is actually 100th of within the hundredths of scoring points. So On the surface, they look, almost identical. And Genesis, let me talk about some of their strengths. They are the number 2 market share company in the CCaaS market. The financial strength isn't as high because they're privately held, so we don't have visibility and access to all the different metrics we look at there. They have, good market momentum. They have very, very strong product mix, same as, as other leading companies. They definitely are leading. They had the same customer sentiment score as Five9, so still, really, really high. And they had well above average customer business success. So those are the top 3. And I think most people would expect, those tend to be, if you were to ask some people top of mind, who are the big companies, who's doing well, I think NICE, Five9, and Genesis are always going to be, roll off of people's tongues quite easily.
Okay.
So I was taking a breath, but
I know.
yeah. So let's look at, I'm going to take them in buckets, right? So those are like the top 3, and let me take the next chunk, which is Cisco, Vonage, and AWS. So Cisco was number 3, I believe, last year. They have definitely a smaller market share, but where Cisco really stands out is, their financial strength. They have the strongest financials, right? Cisco, as a large corporation, just does so well, right? And when we do look at financials, particularly around companies that are large and have multiple divisions, we look at the company as a whole, right? Especially if publicly traded, we look at their top line financials. So Cisco really has that benefit. They also have very strong momentum this last year. They're doing really well. They're converting a lot of their on-prem to their WebEx contact center, right? So to their CCaaS offering. They may not be leading on the product mix, but they're right in average, right? They have most of the key components, right? So they're just average in terms of product capabilities. And so that's Cisco. Vonage did very well this year, and Vonage definitely jumped up in our rankings. So they're number 5. And let me tell you why. Right? What was the big thing that kind of gave them a boost? And that was customer sentiment. They had the highest possible score for customer sentiment, and that gave them a really big necessary boost. Their market momentum is actually below average. They have strong financial strength because of Ericsson. So their financial strength was one of the higher ones for sure. And then but the customer sentiment was really what set them apart. And then let's take number 6, AWS, which in AWS is, from a market share perspective, they are actually the 4th largest CCaaS provider in the market. So that gives them some big pieces. They have good, they've got really strong, solid financial strength because of the larger, Amazon. They have above average market momentum. The product mix is not as robust as some of the other pieces, so they fall a little bit short there. And they had, strong, solid customer business success. So that's the top 6. And I'm not going to go into all the details with everyone else, but let me just mention who they are. Content Guru, they are out of Europe. That is where they're headquartered, but they are absolutely making, this is a global study, and that is where their strength is, but they are doing well, and they've got some good activity here in North America. Then we have 8x8, we have Sprinkler, we have TalkDesk, and we have Dialpad. Those are the top 11, right? I mentioned 12, but we ended up, we looked at the top market shares, and then we did the scoring, and, we really included the top 11. I would say important to note that once we get to the scoring, once we get past NICE and Five9 and Genesis and Cisco, Vonage, AWS, and Content Guru, their scores are so tight. They're really, really close. And then same thing with 8x8, Sprinkler, and TalkDesk, right? They're really, really close. So, the scoring, the differences in scoring between a few of these groupings is really, really close.
That's interesting to note. So if you look at 2023, 2024, and you look at just kind of general market trends, as you sat down to do this initial list for 2025, did you have a different idea of what the result would be, or was this pretty much in line with what you were sort of thinking about? I know it's hard because you said there was such little differentiation between some of the scoring, but is this the general top providers at least?
Yeah, so I'm always going to assume that NICE, Five9, and Genesis are going to be near the top, right? We don't know, particularly the customer pieces that come in from our study, those are hard to know, right? And those can make a difference. Those can make a change. But I assumed, right? And I think it would be shocking if those weren't the top 3, right? But below that, 100% there was, the fact that Vonage was number 5, and that was because of customer sentiment. I would not have thought that, right? I mean, I just...
And Diane, it jumped up from what position in 2024?
Yeah.
Do you recall?
24, don't know off the top
Sorry.
of my head, but I'm going to look it up as we're going around. Vonage last year, and when we did the 2024 report, they were 7. So they went from 7 to 5, but it was because of the customer sentiment, right? And I do think of Vonage as being kind of in the more of the second tier of the top 10, but they really did get a boost. So that was kind of a little bit of surprising. Companies that were not in the report last year that were this year. So Sprinkler had been in 2 years ago, and they definitely have a smaller market share, right? They're not even top 10 for market share. But when we took the top 12 and decided to score across everything else, Sprinkler went from, from a market share perspective of I think number 12 actually. Yeah, they're number 12 in market share, and they ended up in nine, not number 9. Sorry, I had to like do a quick count. They were number 9, and so they went from 12 to 9, right? And why is that, right? What's that? So as a company, they had a little bit above average financial strength. They're publicly traded, so that gives them a little bit above average compared to companies that are privately held, right? So that gives them an advantage that we do have that data. And then the other pieces that kind of stood out for them compared to companies below them, and that was the big thing, is that the companies below them, a lot of them were privately held, or they didn't have a strong financial. So a lot of people wouldn't say, "Oh, Sprinkler, they're really strong financially," but compared to some others, that gives them a boost compared to companies that were below. And what gave them a little bit of a leg up also was customer sentiment. They didn't have the highest customer sentiment. They didn't, weren't well above average, but they did better than the companies that were in that kind of that mix of evaluation. Right. So sometimes that's all it takes, right? Maybe I don't have to blow it out and be number 1, but if I'm in this segment or in this scoring with 4 other companies and everything else being equal, just a little bit higher score here or there can make the difference. And that's what happened with Sprinkler. Dialpad was back in also they were in 2 years ago. They're number 11 this year. And we included them because I thought it was worth it. They have really strong AI capabilities. And so, their product mix is quite strong, definitely compared to a lot of the other companies in the bottom half. Dialpad's product mix is quite robust from that perspective, largely because of a lot of what they've done with AI. Yeah. That's kind of what I think about when I think about those companies in that, the one company that didn't make the mix, number 12, is Twilio. And Twilio had been in the report the previous 2 years. They are number 10 with market share, or 10 or 11. Yeah. So their product mix isn't as robust for sure. Their market momentum isn't as strong. So, and same thing with their customer sentiment. They were below average. So that kind of just took them down, but not by a lot. So at any given point, the top 12, we have companies coming and going.
So you mentioned Twilio as being a company that didn't make it onto the list this year. What other ones are you kind of keeping your eye on? Maybe could have made it to 2025, but they didn't.
Yeah, let me go through some of that, because there are so many, right? There are so many, what's the word? CCaaS providers in the market. Some of them are global, some of them are very regional. So I think it's important that we do, and it's hard, right? Because we do look at market share. And so if you're kind of a newer company and you're just getting started, and probably the prime example, and one that I will get questions about, is Zoom. Right? Zoom.
Of course, right.
Excuse me, what?
I just said, of course.
Yeah. Zoom and RingCentral, right? Those are the two. RingCentral obviously had resold and had a strong partnership with NICE for years, and then they went and launched their own. But those are the two that probably we're going to get the most questions about, right? What's going on? And they have market momentum. And their numbers they need just to keep growing and gaining customers to kind of break into that into that top 12, 13, 14, right? In terms of revenue. So I would say, obviously RingCentral and Zoom. The other one people are going to always ask about is Avaya, right? Because Avaya is a mainstay in the contact center world, and they have been developing CCaaS cloud capabilities here and there. They really take much more of a hybrid approach. They have their own challenges, right, in terms of bankruptcies and changing of management teams and the like. Just, they're just not fully there in terms of having a full CCaaS offering. And so for us, it's more of, what is actually in the market, and does that product really fit our definition today? Other companies I think about when we look at Microsoft. we can never discount Microsoft, UJet, but I would also say UJet and Google. So Google had invested heavily into Google, but Google's moving forward with its own AI powered solution, and it's using UJet for some capabilities. So that kind of combination, I think we can never discount. Also Salesforce, right? So Salesforce making strides in this space, Zendesk, and there's others, but those are the ones, those would be the ones I really am keeping an eye on at the highest level.
Okay. Thank you so much. So really great report, very in-depth, really worth everybody taking a really kind of deep dive into it if you can. But that, of course, is not the only thing you've been working on. So what else is going on with the MetriCast service that you'd like to share with folks?
Yeah, we have the full customer experience study out, over 1,000 businesses on a global study where we're asking them about their technology adoption, who they're using for providers, if they're looking to make changes, what is their decision criteria. So that's a really great study that's out there and it's published. We are constantly now on a quarterly cadence with market shares. And so, along this whole theme around customer experience areas, we have the latest market shares up there for CCaaS in this market, but also CPaaS, the APIs, CRM. And so always that. So just a lot of good content coming out, particularly right now in this bubble, in this month around the customer experience.
Let me add in one other thing, Diane. We cannot overlook the CX MetriStar Awards. We just published those toward the end of the month, and that comes out. You talked a lot about the importance of the customer sentiment and business success metrics in determining the ranking of our MetriRank companies. Those are critical. Those determine who wins our CX MetriStar Awards in CX. And this year we had 9 categories. So we had, besides CCaaS, we had on-prem contact center, we had CPaaS and CRM, agent assist, text AI agents, workforce engagement management, voice of the customer, self-service knowledge management. So if you want to know who the award winners are in that program, listen to our previous MetriSight episode or just go to the website and you can look at the individual reports as well. So that's all for me. Any last thoughts, Diane?
No, I would say, we'll be doing another MetriRank, Beth, and something that
Yes.
you'll be working on.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, but I think that's one to think about. That's around the CPaaS, right? So I think that's from a MetriRank that's coming up next, and that's always a good one too.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for that reminder. And listeners, as always, we're really happy to hear from you. So do feel free to reach out to us. You can use the contact button on the Metrigy site or just reach out to us by email individually. And for now, that is all. On behalf of the Metrigy team, goodbye till next time, and take care, everybody.